Namaskar. So we have rushed through Yama, Niyama, then we've done asanas. The last one we had was pranayam. Not very comprehensive, but as much as we can. And then, because I don't want to bore you with the details of too many things, what you can practice little bit, you take from it. Then the next step, according to Ashtanga Yoga, the Ashta Angas of Yoga, let's put it that way, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. So the fifth one is Pratyahara. So you see, Pratyahara, it's been variously translated. I think the most popular translation is sense withdrawal, like a general term, Pratyahara, sense withdrawal. I would put it this way: selective sense engagement. That's a better word. Selective sense engagement, not sense withdrawal. If you completely withdraw all your senses, you cannot survive on this earth, nothing can be done. Here it's selective sense engagement, which means the yogi develops the capacity slowly, which becomes mature and blossoms during dhyana, of course. So after pranayam, now when you do pranayam, you have learned to give your attention inwardly, right? So when you come out, there is the outside world. So the capacity to go into the inner world and switch off and switch on the outer world, I think that's roughly what Pratyahara is all about. Selective. Now, if you say that when you are meditating and you are giving full attention to the prana inside, if you think now that is also not sense engagement, you are wrong. That's also a sense engagement. This sense engagement will remain as long as the ego remains. When it goes, then it's all, there is no sense and no nonsense, no sense, nothing, it's all gone. But till then, that is also a sensory feeling, it's an internal sensory feeling. What you might call inner organs of sensation and outward organs of indriyas, outside. So, when you do that, you are fully absorbed in it. When you come out of it, a yogi should be a person who, while his eyes are open and he has stopped his pranayam or his meditation, he engages fully, totally into the outside world. This outside and inside, the capacity to switch on and switch off, the senses, internal and external, would be, I think, a proper definition of the word Pratyahara. It could be Pratyahara, because ahara is anything that you eat, absorb, engage, filled in by the senses, and Pratyaya is special. So I would say it's special engagement, specific engagement, internal or out, external, which you are able to shift at will. If that capacity begins to develop, then you are doing Pratyahara. I know this must be a new thing for you. You may not have heard it, but it's true. So, well, for me it's not a new thing, please. It's not original. Maheshwaranath Babaji's blessings, his teachings, wherever I learned at his feet. So, now, give an example. If somebody says, yes, a yogi is not one who walks around with his head in the sky looking up and tumbles and falls down on the steps. Yogi is one who, when he looks up. When he walks with his complete attention there. This is the preparatory stage for the development of dhyan. That's the preparatory stage. Dhyan is one-pointed attention, which means one-pointed attention in whatever you're doing. So, this is what a yogi is. If you decide, when I am driving, I will meditate. That's not a yogi. When you're driving properly. And when you're driving properly, that is meditation. Not while driving to meditate. I hope you get my point. You're going and sitting in the office, you shut the door, nobody is there. office is a place where you sit down and do your meditation on the work that is on hand. Oh, you can a little bit clear your mind before you sit. That's a different matter. And when you meditate, you're not thinking of your laptop, you're not thinking of your messages, you're not trying to... That is meditation. So this distinction, the capacity to switch off and switch on at any given point, at will, is the beginning of pratyahara. When pratyahara grows and becomes mature, it turns into dharana, dhyana, samadhi. The next 3 steps we will deal with that later. So do we have an example? Yes. Now this is an example which I have repeated many times in the satsangs, but it is a very interesting one. Do you know who the founder of Zen was? What is Zen? The great teachings of Zen. Many people I know who are supposed to be educated and intellectual, who think all that we have in this country is useless. Many of them practice Zen. Why? Because Zen, first of all, made in Japan. Olden days nobody liked, now made in Japan is good. Seiko, and so on and so forth. So imported things attract us. It's not only for us, it's quite a common phenomenon. So many people are attracted to Zen. In Malayalam we have a saying, Muttatte mullekku manamilla. That means the jasmine that grows in your own garden doesn't smell nice. The neighbor's garden smells nice. This is the basis of this interest. I'm not saying you shouldn't practice Zen, please do. But please understand that Zen is a derivation of the word dhyana. So where did the word dhyana originate? In this country, where we are sitting in now. At the moment we are in a lockdown, we are in a shutdown. This is the time to think about what we have in our garden instead of thinking, let's look at the other fellow's garden. This is the time to cultivate your jasmine. So let's look at this carefully. Now, the founder of Zen was Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was a Buddhist monk. And Bodhidharma was from somewhere around Tanjore, Tamil Nadu. He was also an expert in unarmed combat. The definition of the word karate means khali hath, unarmed, karate. So, Bodhidharma did 2 things. Since Buddhist monks were not allowed to carry weapons, he took the art of the science of self-defense, which is basically Tamil side of Kalari. There are 2 sections, and took it when he went to China. He was one of the first Buddhist monks from India to go to China. So he took this to China. And there it developed and went off from China to Japan. It became Kung Fu, then it became, and so on. So that's also one of the primary innovations brought about by Bodhidharma. There were no photographs at that time, but if you look at paintings of Bodhidharma, usually you will be scared because he looks wild. His eyes are round and he's staring. And of course, his hair is tied up, scraggly beard, and a little moustache up, and it looks like he's frowning and ready to give you one shot. Zen masters are very famous for that. If they don't get it into your head, they'll give you a kick. They won't hesitate. So anyway, so here goes Bodhidharma into China. He never went to Japan. He didn't take it to Japan. He went to China and introduced this particular form of Buddhism which laid great stress on hours of sitting down and meditating, dhyana. So in the Chinese language, it's difficult to say dhyan. In fact, they don't have the da sound. So dhyan in China became chan. I don't know whether it is in the Cantonese or the Mandarin, but one of them. It's probably Mandarin. It became chan. Even today it's called chan in China. And then from China it went slowly into Japan. When it went to Japan, the chant in the guttural Japanese language became Zan, shortened to Zen. So, this is the origin of Zen. So one day, Bodhidharma was living on the top of a hill in an isolated area in China. There was no COVID, lockout was self-imposed, lockdown. He was living there on the hill. So, 3 young people went looking for him. Well, those days there is no internet. You can't call Lakshmi and say, please, I want to meet him or something like that. There was no internet, there is no telephone, there is no meet Shri Bodhidharma, nothing was there. And there were no banners, no advertisements, no foundations, no nothing. We were just sitting there. And these 3 young men, because there is no Google map, searched for him, spent many days searching for him. Clothes torn, hungry, hurt. They finally found him, climbed up the hill and went there. They saw Bodhidharma sitting. He sensed them coming, but he wouldn't even look at them. And it was lunch time for him. Bodhidharma had only 1 meal a day, not like us, 3 meals a day. And he had a bowl in his hand, wooden bowl and a wooden spoon. And he was very nicely and very artistically drinking the soup with complete attention. And maybe, I think he must have been making and enjoying it. I don't know. So anyway, now society doesn't allow you to make such noises. They say it's uncivilized. So those days, who cares? So eating his soup. So while he is having his soup, these guys reached there. They saw him having his soup, drinking his soup. They put their hands together, bowed out and said, "Sir, we have come from so far. We are hungry, the clothes are torn, we are tired. Came only for one reason." There are many people who send me such emails. Come only for one reason. We have come to learn Zen and attain Satori. Unfortunately for me, when emails, they already have attained Satori, but they want to do something more. Kundalini has gone up, now what to do? So, anyway, we need to attain Satori on moksha. He is drinking his soup. Then he said, "I'm drinking my soup." They waited. Still it is going on, slurp, slurp. Then they again repeated the same thing. "I'm drinking my soup," he said. Then he called an assistant and he said to him, "Give them their soup." So all 3 of them got one wooden bowl and a spoon, and while they were drinking the soup, it occurred to them, what a silly thing to do. We came to find Satori and learn Zen, and here we are drinking soup. This we could do at home also. And thinking, what is this? So next time they again asked him, "Please teach us Zen, let us attain Satori like in Bodh Gaya." And they said, they got very angry. So they said, "We are also drinking our soup." Because he said, "I am drinking my soup." So they said, "We are also drinking our soup." Bodhidharma then finished his soup. He put down his bowl and he said, "No, you are not drinking your soup. You are drinking your soup and you are thinking of Zen. Right? You are drinking your soup and you are thinking of Zen. I am drinking my soup. I am drinking my soup. I am drinking my soup. This is Zen." Get what I mean? So, when you are drinking your soup, you are not thinking of Satori. When you are looking for soup, you are not thinking of the soup. These are two departments. The yogi through practice develops the capacity to shut one and put on the other. Through practice, there is no technique. Only through practice. In the beginning, when young people become brahmacharis and go and wander, you'll see them, they're walking, they're still in summer. They're standing in the annashala for food. Is going on. And hey Maharaj, So, to meditate when you go back and be in the proper line when you get food, these are, so this splitting of things, this switching off and switching on is pratyahara. If you are an expert, you can do it, even if the thing you are engaged in is so interesting, you can switch it off and go to something else. This is the art of dying to one thing and living to another. So you can call it the art of dying and living, both. So this, how do you practice it? Well, the first step is to start practicing your internalization, which means how to turn your mind one point. It'll cut off the outside at that time. So now you can't cut off the outside because the mind is full of outside things, because most of the time our eyes are open, ears are open. We absorb through the senses, through the indriyas. So what do? Engage it in something inside. And what can you engage it in? There are many things you can engage the mind in. Inside as well as outside. I'll come to that, why I'm saying this. Inside, couple your breath to, tie it up to the breath, your mind. Let your mind be totally watching, seeing, breathing, totally absorbed in your breath, in and out, in and out. After some time, the outside world is cut off. You are only connected here, one way. Other way is some form of japa, especially if it's a mantra. Some people say, oh, it has become very mechanical. It's precisely because it is mechanical that it is given, because if it has meaning, then your mind will wander around for the meaning. It's the sound that you should listen to, not the meaning. So, Om, Om, Om. Don't think, oh, is creation. Om, Om. So, japa is one way of doing it. Two. Now there is also an external way of cutting your mind off from the outside world in general and fixing it on one object. What is that? Total pada sevana of the deity. Suppose you have a beautiful Krishna and you like it. Don't now go into this whether Krishna exists, Krishna does not exist, our avatar is still hanging around and Ashwatthama sitting in the Himalayas. Forget it. Let's not discuss that now. That's a different story. Suppose you love Krishna, you have that picture or you have an image. Now engage yourself totally in decorating it, in cleaning it, in feeding it. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to do full attention on the mother goddess, feeding it, and finally he used to take the flower and instead of putting it on, he used to do it and put it here. Because the mother was here, he discovered. He was not sitting outside. Nobody will go to Dakshineshwar if Ramakrishna was not around. He made that deity alive because it was alive in his heart. Though simply saying Ma go, it doesn't make any sense. And then you do whatever you like. No. So that is one of the ways of doing it. There's a third or a fourth way of doing it. I don't know if it's third or fourth. Third, fourth way of doing it, yes. Totally involve yourself in doing some service to somebody. You see somebody starving or see somebody sick, go and look after that person. Forget about yourself at that point. Do it. That's also pratyahara. Now, when you come out from there and go back home, you should be thinking of your home, not about that person. That cut off is called pratyahara. Otherwise you get, now to think about something all the time without being able to switch off is not pratyahara. It is obsession. It's not meditation, it is obsession. So don't get caught in obsessions. A yogi is a person who has full control over his mind and senses. So at a given point, he would be able to switch on to something or to switch off from something and hang on to something else. Practicing this is called pratyahara. And when a yogi practices pratyahara for some time, then what happens? His mind becomes quiet and calm and becomes prepared for dharana. Why? Because there is no contradiction, there is no conflict. I want to think about that, I am thinking of this. I want to think about that, I am thinking of this. This is where conflict starts in one way. So there is no conflict, because when you are doing something, you are only doing something. When you are doing something else, you are only doing something else. When this happens, the mind also slowly learns to be free of conflict. When there is no conflict, there are no two opposing forces pulling in opposite directions. Always there is one direction and everything is quiet. That prepares you to the next step called dharana. Right? So we have done now Yama, Niyama. At some point we'll go back to Yama, Niyama and discuss in detail, but at the moment, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. So this is today's talk on Pratyahara. So we can stop here now. So think about Pratyahara and see how you can bring it about in your daily life. When you're driving, don't close your eyes and meditate. Even if there is no traffic on the road much because of COVID, don't do it. Mere ghar aaya o sajana. Let us stop now. Thank you very much. Namaskar.